In this first video, I want to review with you 4 distinct phases of the writing process. There are 4 distinct phases. Number 1, pre-writing. Number 2, writing. Number 3, revising. And number 4, editing. And I have taken this chart from a website called Lucid Chart. You'll see the link on the bottom of this slide. And I've also included a link to this website in the resources section in this module. I have also included a few other handouts on the writing process. Some of them divide the writing process into 5 phases, some into 4. They are essentially very similar. I like these 4 phases because they provide a very succinct overview of what most writers tend to go through as they write. So the first part is called pre-writing and has a lot to do with organizing ideas. So it's the phase where you want to familiarize yourself with your chosen and assigned topic, which means you want to read some general information about the topic. If you're already familiar with the topic, you can think about what you already know and review some of the sources that maybe made you familiar with the topic in the first place. It's also the time to search for relevant evidence-based literature on your topic. All of this happens in the pre-writing phase. You want to organize your ideas that you have on this particular topic. You can use the method of outlining, meaning writing down ideas in a chronological order or in some sort of order that makes sense to you. You can also use a more, two-dimensional way of organizing your ideas by a mind map, which often they look like this. You have the topic in the middle here and then sort of branches out and then subtopics here. And there are software programs and apps for mind mapping as well. So there are a lot of resources available to you. So and any other visual organizers that work for you in terms of organizing your ideas. And another step in pre-writing is you definitely want to make sure you work with a reference librarian and a writing consultant as well in this stage. I will also add ways to get in touch with reference librarians as well as writing consultants at UMB for you in the resources section as well. So now when you finished this pre-writing phase, and one thing I forgot to mention earlier is that these 4 phases, though they are distinct, tend to overlap. So sometimes you might be further ahead in the process than pre-writing, but you might have to go back to some organizing your ideas or meeting with a reference librarian again and so on. So the second phase is actually the writing phase, where you are writing and preparing for revisions. So I like to start with writing a general summary of what you have learned about your topic in your words. So that's what I like to do when I start a new paper. So you've read all this, you read a lot of things, you've looked at a lot of material, you start just summarizing in your own words. I suggest you start summarizing the main ideas from the evidence-based literature in your own words. And I want to emphasize in your own words, quotations are allowed in many papers, although some instructors will limit the number of quotations you're supposed to do. And that is because we're more interested as instructors in what you have to say and how you understand the material. So make sure you already start doing that here rather than just copying and pasting what the authors are saying in the actual papers you're reviewing. I also suggest you start organizing your written material to meet the requirements of the writing assignments. So you might not always have a research paper, just write a research paper on this topic and then hand it in, but you actually might have specific requirements, specific questions you have to ask, specific sections. So use that rubric, use that guideline or those guidelines as ways to help you organize in this phase as well. And I'm a big fan of writing for 25 minutes and then taking a 5-minute break. You might want to look up the Pomodoro method. Pomodoro is Italian for tomato, and it's literally named after the little tomato timer that you have in the kitchen. So check out the Pomodoro method. It's basically what I'm suggesting to you here. And I also want to suggest to set aside regular times to write. And you can never start too early. Well, you probably can, but you can definitely start too late, which is like a week before the paper is due. So give yourself sufficient time to plan this out. And make sure that as you're summarizing, you document where you get your information from. So you add citations, even in your drafts, in your notes, and so on. Very important, because otherwise you might end up accidentally plagiarizing. The third phase of the writing process is what we usually term revising, in which you make sure that the paper that you've written so far, which might be very jumbled, and that's okay, but you now want to make sure it presents a coherent story. You might have to move things around as much and as often as you like until the structure makes the best sense to you. And that means moving paragraphs, sentences, taking things out, adding things, which leads me to my next point. Don't be afraid to delete and rewrite. Really, don't be. It's perfectly fine. Everybody does it all the time. Each paragraph should be between 1.5 to a 3/4 page long in a double-spaced Word document with 12-point font. And this is just sort of a rule of thumb, but it's a good visual to think about as you're revising what you've drafted. Make sure that each paragraph needs to focus on one topic. We'll talk a little bit more about this in the next module on paragraph structure as well. And make sure you get feedback from fellow students, trusted friends, and the writing consultants. So the writing consultants in the UMB Writing Center here for you, the Student Success Center and the School of Nursing has a writing consultant. Make use of us. And then lastly, the editing phase. And again, as I said earlier, these phases do overlap. So you might be in editing and realize, gosh, I got to revise something much more for content. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't flow well. Of course, then you'll go back. But in the editing phase, you want to make sure that your paper addresses all the requirements. Can't emphasize this enough, all the requirements. So really carefully read those assignment instructions. Make sure that the entire paper is organized according to APA formatting guidelines. And there's no other way but figuring out where to get your information about APA, either to the online writing lab at Purdue. I'm a big fan of the APA style blog. I'll link to that in some of the resources in one of the other modules towards the end of this whole section of modules. I will address with you documenting your ideas. So be on the lookout for that. I'm a big fan of reading the paper out loud to yourself because you can catch sentences that are unclear. And then, of course, make sure you check for correct grammar and punctuation. If you need help with that or not sure about it, again, get a trusted friend, fellow classmate, and/or writing consultant to help you out with that. And even once you've done all that, make sure you have someone else take a look at your paper again, not just for the editing piece, but for the overall clarity. We often think we're very clear about what we're saying, and then we actually are not. I mean, I see this all the time when I revise my own work about 4 days later after I've written it, and I'm like, what did I mean? So make sure you get that check as well. And I want to finish with this quote by James Missioner that says, "I'm not a very good writer, but I'm an excellent rewriter." So take that to heart. Nobody's born a very good writer. We all made excellent writers and good writers by continuously rewriting.